All right, I guess we're about to get started. My name is Heath Stone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a current BCCI board member. I collect basically any knife, fixed blade, typically made before 1985. Really, the 1930s through 1985 is the area that I've honed in on through the years, and have researched and tried to collect data on. It's the history of buck knives fascinates me, and that's what's kind of driven me to start compiling this stuff. I keep records of it, and occasionally am asked to do a seminar. If any of you guys were at Smoky Mountain, you saw my 1961 to 1985 seminar over the white and black handled fixed blade knives. This one is going to take a step back, and we're going to go basically pre-factory production, which is going to be 1930s, 40s, any time before 1960. So that's what we're going to focus on. As we're going through the seminar, the thing with these old knives and what's so important as collectors is to record this data, because it is so hard to find information from the 1940s, 1950s, any of that time frame, because there wasn't a lot that was written down and recorded. We've got, a few receipts here and there, some knives, some catalogs, but it's just, there wasn't so much attention put on collecting at that point in time. So anyway, I've tried to do the best I can to capture and give you an idea of kind of what was going on with the Buck family starting in Mountain Home, Idaho, and then leading into when they moved into San Diego. So we'll get started. This is a picture of Hoyt Buck. Kind of an iconic picture. He's probably holding like a 105 or something here, a lucite handle, wearing that heavy leather apron that he would wear. Okay, so Hoyt Heath Buck made his first buck knife around the turn of the century. Over the next few decades, he made knives for friends and families. I've heard stories for people that live in Mountain Home, Idaho, that there was a park called Railroad Park in the area that Hoyt would go and visit, and he would make knives, and he would take them, make things for kids and such, and it was a real integral part of the community. So, Hoyt definitely knew how to make knives with his blacksmith experience as he was growing up. And as the war broke out, there was a call across the United States for people to donate whatever they had to help the war effort, whether it be knives or whatever, metals, anything that they needed. Well, Hoyt, he definitely knew how to make knives, and he made a bunch of them, and it was geared towards this war effort. So in the basement of the church in Mountain Home, Idaho, he started producing knives. And there's a small article that was written in 1947. It was in a magazine article. I'm going to read that to you, and it'll kind of set the stage for how Hoyt's business grew and expanded. But it says, Pastor-craftsman H.H. Buck's hobby for 30 years was making hunting knives that would hold an edge. In 1942, a tail gunner was about to fly into the Pacific combat action and asked Buck, whose congregation calls him Pastor Buck, to make him a hunting knife. The young airman said he had heard about flyers who had been shot down over unknown islands and had difficulty cutting their way out of the dense jungles. He wanted to be prepared with a stout, sharp hunting knife. For the good of democracy, Hoyt said, I decided to turn plowshares into swords. Pastor Buck relates, and in the next 3 years, I made more than 2,000 knives for our flyers. Word had gotten around that the Buck knives and orders poured in from air bases all over the country. One captain of a B-24 bomber back in the country recovering from battle wounds ordered a knife for each crew member before returning to the Pacific. So Hoyt's Buck Knives business was really got its start in Mountain Home, Idaho, and in the basement of that church. And if you guys have any questions, please just wave your hand and stuff.
Was he really a pastor?
Yes, he was. Yeah. Here's the article that I just basically read an excerpt from. You can find this on the Collector Club website if you'd like to read the entire article. There's a lot of stuff in there, but this is the stuff that was, this is kind of the information from the early 40s that I wanted to relate to you. And that's the remainder of the article. There's a picture of this downstairs on the wall. This would have been one of the knives, I believe, right, Joe, that would have come out of Mountain Home, the trench knife. This would have been made for World War II, this one right here. It's very difficult to figure out which knives came from Mountain Home, Idaho, and which ones didn't. There's kind of a theory that I have that, once Hoyt left Mountain Home, Idaho, and went to San Diego, he had a process down, and I think he had somewhat standardized the way his knives looked, unless they were a special order knife. But this is one that I found, and it's a machete, and it's stamped H.H. Buck 1943. We can only assume that Hoyt built this, not real sure, but it with the evidence that we've piled up, it really seems that, this is something that Hoyt would have built. And you can see right here where he tried to stamp the blade, all he got out was an H, and was unable to finish stamping it, probably because the blade was hard. But this is a similar knife that was made, and it's stamped H.H. Buck, very similar to the machete that we just showed you. There's a little better picture. And then here's where he stamped the blade as well. You'll notice a lot of times double stamps and things. Sometimes he'll stamp right over a letter with another letter, just trying to get it going. I found this knife in Paris, France, and brought it in. Once again, can only assume that it was made for the war effort, especially finding it in France. It would seem as though that's where it came from. Here is Hoyt and Daisy out front of the Assembly of God Church, where he started making knives in Mountain Home, Idaho. So that's the picture. It's some of these pictures came out of the Tom Abel's book, The Story of Buck Knives. So there's a little more information you can definitely read about in there. But Hoyt and Daisy, about 1945, they decided to leave Mountain Home, Idaho. They said that the winters were extremely harsh and the summers were very humid, and I think it had affected Daisy's health some. The war had come to an end, and the need for buck knives in that area had dwindled since it was a military town. Hoyt didn't have the business that he once had, so they decided to move to California, and they moved in with Al and Ida. This is a picture. Joe, do we know who this is in the picture?
I think there's some guesstimate that it's either Frank or Chuck.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, that I had heard. But basically, you have an old lean-to. When Hoyt arrived in San Diego, he built a lean-to to start the business back up again next to Al's one-car garage. So when Hoyt gets to San Diego, he's got to figure out how to build this business. He starts out in Mountain Home, and the war really drives his business, but now it's peacetime, and so he moves in, and he starts basically going door to door, knocking on doors and taking orders from people in the local area. This is a receipt from a sports shop in would have been La Mesa, California. And a lot of this is just kind of an educated guess on how he built his business, but some of it, he talks about, I'd go and knock on doors, take orders, go home, fill those orders, and then the next day or two go back out and deliver locally the orders that I had. And so this is an example, this is October 18th, 1946. This would have been, Hoyt out locally doing business. Here's another example, not for sure what year this came from, but you know, Hoyt also, there was mention that he would go through the butcher shops and different places in town, and hey, I'll sharpen your knives and bring them right back to you. And it's a service they continue to offer and still do today. So Hoyt is in a position to where he really wants Al to come work for him full time, to you know, build knives full time. Al is currently a bus driver in 1945 when Hoyt arrives. And Hoyt continues asking him, come on, Al, let's do this thing. I know we can make a run at it. We can make this work. Well, Al says, in his own words, he says, gosh, I didn't want to build knives. It was dirty and hot, and I was a bus driver, and I enjoyed, you know, being able to meet new people on the bus and, you know, grow relationships that I already had, and I just didn't honestly want to do it. And he reluctantly accepted, and he came on, and I think it's sometime around 1947. You know, there's nothing real definitive. I was asking Chuck last night, and you know, there's nothing super definitive. It was 1947 or a little bit before, but definitely Chuck told me that Al had started helping Hoyt prior to him quitting his bus driving job. And so he got on board, and then they had to figure out, okay, we're selling things locally, but we've got to take it to the next level, because now you have Al's entire family is depending on the knife business as well as Hoyt and Daisy. And so we start to see some changes in the company during this time, and one of those changes is that they go to mail order, a national audience. It's no longer just a part of California and the people that know the company. This is going out in Outdoor Life. I believe that was the first one, right, Joe? Outdoor Life, 1947. So it goes out in Outdoor Life, any of the Sports Afield, any of the old hunting magazines. And basically, they started standardizing the colors of the knives. They went to red, black, blue, and green, I believe were the, you know, basically the original colors. Because, you know, a lot of the knives Hoyt built early on were multicolored and had lots of designs and patterns to them in the lucite. Well, when you're doing a mail order business, you've got to standardize it. And so, anyway, they would put ads like this, and there were lots of different ones, and they would go out through the magazines, and these orders would just come in, and they continued to fill orders this way all the way up through when they incorporated in 1961, and they had to actually, you know, finish some of those orders that were coming in, even though that they had incorporated. This is a picture of an early buck catalog. This is another way that you know, they would do their marketing in the early days. They had catalogs and various things. You can see some of them out here in the display case that had their names on them. I think there was ink blotters and some rulers and different things they would use. Very similar to today as far as marketing goes. It's an early buck order form. This would have been inside of a catalog that was sent out to you, and it's, you know, kind of self-explanatory. It would, you know, you'd go through the catalog and write down what you wanted and how many, and you could hand this back in to the Buck Knife Company. So, like I said, in 1947, you got a lot going on. You've got Al Buck and his family has now joined the knife business. They're putting out national ads. They start adding on to the little area back there at 1272 Morena Boulevard. They add on lawnmower shop. Chuck said he was responsible for the lawnmower shop. Joe, was it just sharpening that they would do on lawnmower blades, or did they work on lawnmowers as well?
Well, I know they also sharpened saws, hand saws.
Yep.
And I think they also tuned up lawnmowers.
Tuned up mowers and stuff. This was all in an effort to keep the company going and to keep food on the table and keep, you know, things going in the right direction. So, Joe, do you remember what year Chuck and yourself started putting these groups together?
Well, I think that was probably 15 years ago now.
Okay. So, about 15 years ago, Chuck and Joe sat down and tried to start making sense out of all the different knives and the way they were stamped, and there's quite a few differences in these knives. Came up with about 10 groups, I believe is what it is. And so what we'll do is we'll go through what Chuck and Joe, have deemed group 1, group 2, and there's pictures that follow, and definitely if you have questions about them, please stop, and I'll explain some of this as we get into the pictures. But group 1 knives are stamped on the right side with a large 3/32 4-strike stamp. What the 4-strike means, it was individually stamped B, then U, then C, then K. And you'll see lots of variants in that because they might have grabbed the wrong stamp, and the word may start with a U instead of a B. They may have double stamped over a letter. So you see lots of things. It was all done by hand, and they're in a hurry just grabbing and hitting blades. And so they never wasted the blades. And you'll see pictures. I don't believe I have any in here, but you'll see pictures where they put a B over a U, and they just kept going with it. But that's what a 4-strike means, as opposed to today where the word just comes down and stamped and comes up, and it's just one stamp. During this time, you're going to see handles that were made out of lucite and masonite, and there's lots of different colors, and we'll move to some of that now. This one, it's an early, and this is what we mean by 4-strike. You can see it's not uniform. It's B and a U and a C and a K, so it's just hand stamped. I don't know if you can see the color of the handle, but that is a solid black lucite handle. A lot of these group 1 knives I've found, they have model numbers on the opposite side. Some of them do and some don't. Right here you'll see a model number 104. That was their stock number, basically like a 119. This is a 107. It's kind of a unique knife, and this got a lot of discussion going between Joe and Chuck and a couple of other collectors. We started realizing that each of us had one that looked very, very similar. This one is actually wood with aluminum and a copper band in the middle. It's a scalar knife. It's about the size of like a 105 would be, fixed blade. But it's, here's the back side, and it's stamped 107. It's very light. Here's a very similar knife, except for the handle is masonite. And it's got the copper band in the middle. That's a little bit better picture right there. And then here's a solid handle masonite. This is all similar knives. There you go. There's a close-up picture of the font. You can see it's a large 3/32 font. There's a model number right on the back. Brings us to group 2. It's kind of the same, except for the stamp gets a little smaller. He's not quite as large during that time. Black is an option. I think, based off of what we know, there's rules in all of this, basically loose guidelines to follow, but it's never 100%. I mean, it's, there's an exception to almost every one of these that we've found so far. Here's an example of it. And I think I have a better picture of the font, but the font has definitely gotten smaller. It's still a 4-strike. There it is. There's a little bit better picture. Here's another example of a 105. And just kind of notice the handle materials as you go through. The previous picture, this knife, you can kind of see through, and you can see the bolt that he would weld on underneath there. And then you get to these, and it becomes a little more opaque. You can't see through. He used, gosh, I don't know, clear, transparent. He used so many different handle materials, especially early on. That's a real nice knife. It's a multicolored knife. Another 105. There you go. So that's a good picture, and you can kind of see when you hold them up to the light, you could see where the tang came in right here, and then he would braze or weld a bolt on, and then he would thread the butt cap, and it would spin on, and he would tighten it down, and that allows you to kind of see the construction of the knife. It's a better example of the font on this one that he used. Once again, you can see the bolt coming through the handle. Another early one. A lot of these, I have model numbers at the top, and you know, he made quite a few different models early on. And a 108 is going to be very similar to like a model 102 would be today. He would make different models, and like a 108, you could get it, if you look in the catalogs, you could get it in like a 4-inch or a 4.5 inch, and he provided options like that, you know, that you can get them in different lengths. This is a little 107, alternating green and red. 108, and you know, I don't know why he did it, but occasionally, like this guard, I mean, the knife is very small. It's, you know, it's like a little 102, and the guard would have been, you know, it is way oversized for the knife, but you know, it's probably a special order that somebody wanted, you know, to protect their fingers a little more. It's another variation of a Group 2. It's a black handle and has the kind of see-through red in the middle. Group 3 knives are stamped on the right side with a single strike stamp. Handles will be of various colors, stacked lucite, often have one or more solid white spacers in the middle. Usually a pin through the pommel. The sheaths, you know, will be similar to the early ones that were just stamped buck across the front. But a lot of times when you know, he started putting pins in the pommels, and Leroy, he can kind of tell you why, but when you're tightening down those knives, sometimes, you know, it doesn't stop in just the right place, and you may have to back it off a little bit, and so they can get loose. And so what he'd do is he'd drill through, and he would pin them to keep that butt in place. And
Put paper too.
yep. And a lot of times if he couldn't get the butt to stop, or the pommel in the right position, he might put a little piece of paper or something in there, or a shim of some sort. You'll see on some of these knives that he might throw a leather spacer on the back of a lucite knife, and you know, they served a purpose. It was to get things lined up in the right position, you know. So many different variations you'll see through. So the way that this is stamped is just a single stamp. It's done very much like today, and it's of similar size, I guess, but it just comes down in one time and stamps buck all together. So he didn't have all the problems with the B and the U and CK. It was just one time. You can see the pin that we were just reading about and talking about. He would drill right through, pin it, keep things straight. There's a better picture of it. This is an old kind of dagger style bone handle. You'll see him. He made different knives similar to this, and there's one out in the case out here. It's a throwing knife, aluminum handle. You don't see a lot of them, but they're out there. It's early 117. Joe, I think, did this come through your... You saw this knife.
Yeah.
Did you ever get to see it in person?
Yeah, it's a unique 117. It's almost kind of like a straight razor blade.
Yeah. So what Hoyt would do is he'd take these surplus knives and he would knock the blade out of them, and he would make his own blade and put them in, and you could come in with any knife you wanted, your own knife, and if you wanted a buck blade in your handle, he'd knock it out, make you a blade, put it back in. So what were those, the old camellias? Yeah. There's an example of one from from the same time frame. It's just a single stamp buck. And I don't know who the manufacturer of that. Did you ever know that, Joe? I never could find out whose handle that was. I don't know. But it's a reblade. Group 4 knives are stamped dot, buck, dot. On the right side, the word buck is a single stripe, and the dots are individually stamped, and there's a pin through the pommel. You can see right here, I'm not sure why, but he adds a dot here and here on either side of buck. And this is a pretty popular handle color that he had, and this is red with black and white spacers, and you see that repeated a few times. You don't see too many that are similar, but there are a few patterns that you'll see. That knife that was just pictured in this one were actually purchased together, and I'm assuming whoever originally bought them from Buck probably bought them as a pair at the time. And this is a larger knife, the other one was a smaller one. Unique thing about this knife is there's no maker's mark on it. It was not stamped Buck whatsoever on either side. And then you can tell at some point this knife was repaired in the 1960s because it has a bone hard fiber spacer right at the back of it. Probably the lucite spacer broke, no telling, but that knife was repaired at Buck in the 1960s. And one of the things that Joe and Larry have taught me is to read what the knife's telling you. And they used bone hard fiber spacers from 1962 to, what was it, Joe's, 67 or 69?
Late 69.
Late 69. So this knife was repaired somewhere in the 1960s, sent into Buck and repaired, and that was the answer for the problem, and they fixed it. So here's one. It's kind of neat. Once again, it's stamped dot, buck, dot, but it's got pink spacers. It's red with two pink ones. Kind of a neat knife. I don't see too many pink ones that they made, but.
Heath, could I ask a question on that one? That last one?
Yeah.
Do you or Joe or maybe Leroy know whether any of those have been taken apart and if they're pink all the way through? Or if perhaps it was white and in buffing the thing, it picked up some kind of red tinge that made it look pink?
I've never seen lucite take on another color. It might be possible, but I mean, have you? I've not seen it. I've never seen a white turn another color. I mean, I'm not sure if you have, Joe.
No, usually the white's like a solid white. I could see if it was maybe clear, it may be picking up some of the red, but it's usually a solid white.
It was definitely like a bright pink in person. The majority of the knives you're seeing, I've either owned or still own, and so it's. But yeah, it was definitely pink, and I'm not sure if they're solid all the way through or not, but it's definitely pink. This one, it's so hard to tell. So many of these knives, you got to hold up in the light to truly see what it is, But like this one, it's black, and then these spacers are not black; they're see-through dark blue. And after I owned the knife for a while, I didn't realize it until after that, But no, it's all right. But I learned you really got to hold them up and take a look. And this one, it's one that doesn't follow the rules for some reason. I'm not sure why, but of this era, they're supposed to say dot, buck, dot. Well, he left one of the dots off up here, so it just says buck, dot. And just one of those things that he just messed up on, didn't pay attention to, or maybe there was a reason. I'm not sure, but there's so many unknowns when it comes to this stuff that. Don't really know. Whoa. Wow. Okay, where are we going here? I don't know what just happened, but we went too far. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, here we go. So here's another one. This is kind of a unique knife. You know, with the fish scalers on them especially, you don't see a whole lot of them. It's kind of rare. And, you know, this is one of the few that I've seen in this model. It's a larger knife, about the size of a 105. And you just don't see a lot of them, but the fish scaler makes it extremely rare. Here's a smaller version that you see a little more of. The smaller knives you typically see. The larger ones with the scaler you don't really see. Then you get into the skinners. I don't know why, but these are so hard to find. I mean, I don't know if he just didn't make very many of them or people held on to them, but the skinners, which is essentially like the 103 would be today, you just can't find them. They're so hard to find. But very, very neat knives. He made 3 different models of them. You know, just size was the only difference. Yeah, yeah. See, and you don't know why. I drive Joe nuts with this stuff because I'll email him or call him. Hey, this doesn't make sense, and he's like, I don't know. You know, he just scratches his head kind of like I do, and it's hard to tell sometimes because there's no place to go and find the information, unfortunately. You know, so we have to make a lot of assumptions as we go. Fillet knife. You know, when I first saw these knives, at first I thought it was a mistake or something was done wrong. But as I saw more of them, I realized that's how he built the knives, and they actually all look the same. But it has an area right there, so you can place your thumb, lay the fish on its side, and push. Is that what you would say, Joe? I mean, is that?
Yeah, that's a good theory.
Yeah, I mean, but that's what I've seen. You know, they seem to all be built very similar to that. And that's the only thing I could figure of why it's like that.
Would that fillet been just that era, or would they possibly made them in the other groups earlier?
Well, I don't know if they made them any earlier or not. I've not seen an example. Just really going off of, they made them later. I think I have some more pictures of them going on through the years that look like this, but I've not seen pictures. Have you seen any earlier than this?
Well, you know, we got a couple in the company archives. I don't know what era they are.
Yeah.
They are lucite.
Right. Yeah. Group 5 are stamped dot buck dot on the right, and then you have a model number that's stamped on the other side. On and off, they put model numbers on the knives, and I'm not sure why it would start and stop. I really don't know. Has there ever been any idea to that, Joe, as to why? A rhyme or reason?
I've seen some 4-stripe with model numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, it could have been. That could have been the case, but we don't really know why, because there was some early knives that were stamped with model numbers, and then they stopped, then they started again, and I'm not really sure why, but they did. This is a letter from, I guess early 1949, and it just talks about, basically your customers appreciate a good knife. Of course they do, and just talks about, kind of a program that they have set up with a dealer discount, just an early piece of documentation that's out there. Like I said, there's not a whole lot, so it is neat to see it. And you can tell that, it's something that Al's got going. Hoyt's name's at the top, and Charles Shafter and Al Buck at the top. But it starts to appear that, in 1949, Al is starting to take over the company. You've got Hoyt, which is battling colon cancer at the time. Al, up until this point, had been doing all of the handle work, majority of it, and kind of Hoyt's pride and joy was grinding of the blades. And so Hoyt realizes that he wants to set things up for Al, so he realized he's got to take over the grinding of the blades. And so from his hospital bed, dying of cancer, he teaches Al how to hollow grind the blades. So Al would grind the blades, and he would take them into the hospital and show them to Hoyt, and he'd say, no, that's not right. You're too much here, not enough here. he'd go back, and about the third or fourth time he arrived back at the hospital, he said, "I can now go on, my son knows how to make knives." And so Al takes over the company full-time in 1949. Hoyt moves on to Washington and passes away, and I believe that Chuck told me last night that he's buried in Spokane somewhere. So not sure where, but that's the information that I got from Chuck. So this is kind of a neat thing. There's a picture of that I found, and it's a membership card, and it expires in 1950. So obviously it was from 1949, and Al had signed it, and just kind of a neat little card, something you don't see too often, but it's 1 year free sharpening, polishing, honing. Kind of a neat little card, little idea that he came out with, and you know, I'm not sure if that card, you have any idea if it cost anything to do it? It's just all free. It wasn't a program you had to
Yeah,
sign
no
up.
idea. I think it's super cool. I wish I knew the story behind them.
Yeah, the handling charge, yeah, to mail it back and forth probably. Yeah. And here's a picture of a little 107 during that time frame. These are neat little knives. They're, like I said, they're about the size of a 102. And I've got pictures, I believe, of this knife with an opposite picture. There you go, with the model number on the back side. Once again, like we said, they've got the model numbers that they're including during this time frame. It's a picture of a little 108, very similar in size, basically minus the fish scaler. And it's got the model number right on the back. Here's another Skinner. Like I said, I don't have a whole lot of pictures of them because there's just not a lot of them out there that we've seen anyway. And this is more of the standard color that you would see through the mail order. That solid color with a white stripe, and it may have 2 or it might have 3, but that was one of the main colors that they went with.
That says 112.
That's the model number, yeah. They had 3 models. It was 111, 112, and 113, Joe. The only difference would just be the size of it. Some of the Skinners were a little larger and some were a little smaller. They reused model numbers, if that's what you're asking. They recycle model numbers here at Buck, and it drives Joe crazy, and it drives collectors crazy, you know, because you see things that they reuse. It's just like the early 103s were called Model 110. And so, you know, it can become confusing at times, but there it is right there on the back, so you can see it. You got it stamped. Group 6 knives are similar, but now they're stamped dot buck dot on the left side, and the model number is on the right side. You know, I'm not sure why it went back and forth. I'm sure they had a reason at the time. Here's a 104 camper. You can see the dot buck dot. It's dropped off, and then on the opposite side, 3 strike, 104. Here's another one. This one is a lignum vita handle. We're starting to get into other handle materials. They're going away from lucite, and we start going into some of the woods during this time frame. Here's a picture of it, and it's got 104 over here on the back side. You'll see some of the construction changes that go through, and I don't want to get too deep into it because it's even confusing to Joe and I at times on why knives were built the way they were, but you'll see a design change in some of the knives. For a couple of years, they started building the knives actually a little bit different, and then went back to the way that they were. Here's another 107. In the previous group, I showed a picture of this knife, and everything's just reversed. The buck dot buck is now on the left, the 107's on the right, and they mirror each other. It's just everything's on opposite pages. I threw this one in here. It's the same stamp configuration and everything, but I wanted to show you at times he would use leather spacers mixed in with lucite. It's you know, It's a different look. You don't see it too often, but it's something neat and notable to see. If you're out there collecting, you might run across it, and that's one thing you might see is either leather or paper. Here's a better picture of it. Model 105. And the 105, I mean, it's the same knife as it was back then as it is today. There's not much that has changed there. That's one of the knives that's lasted the longest. It's a small 102. Once again, keeping up with the model number on the right side. Twin set. These are pretty neat. They're hard to find, but he did make them, and you know, Buck kind of reintroduced that back, you know, throughout the 60s or 70s, 80s, you know, going through, and they kind of kept that rolling for quite a while. So 116 axe knife combo set. You know, I believe there's a ad a little bit later that talks about they were getting quite a bit of feedback from customers saying, hey, we'd like an axe developed, something for hunting. I would assume it was probably more along the lines for splitting the pelvic bone of a deer is probably what hunters and would have wanted this for. They're not really made for chopping wood or anything. It'd be more for field dressing an animal, I would have to assume. There's a little bit better picture. All the axes that I've seen, they did not follow this dot, buck, dot, or have model numbers on them. They would have been stamped Buck Lifetime, either right here on the throat or up on the face of the axe. I'm not sure why. Joe, any idea why they went with just Buck Lifetime on there and didn't stick to the same patterns? I mean, yeah, because they didn't stamp Lifetime on the knives of any that I've seen, but for some, yeah, true, that's very true. But they would stamp Buck Lifetime on the actual axes. Group 7, stamp dot, buck dot on the left. Now there's no model number. We've completely dropped the model number once again, and handles of lignum, vita, you know, are common in this group. Like I said, doesn't always exactly fit. There was a lignum vita knife in the previous group. So here's what I was saying about the construction. You'll see a lot of this during this time frame, during the, I guess it'd be early 1950s when we see that pommel change.
Well, there was like a certain era, we're kind of, in my mind, I'm thinking mid-50s.
Yeah,
you get
maybe
that real
mid-50s,
exaggerated finger groove,
Right.
and the bolt sticking through that smaller pommel.
Yeah.
And it's just a huge mystery. We see them advertised on ads with a Wakarusa address,
Yes.
where Buck Knives never was. But, you know, right down the street from them in San Diego.
Well, and I think the address is, I think, like 9274 or something, Wakarusa. And what's weird is it's even in the magazine ads to, you know, send your money to this address, but they're operating at a 1272 Morena Boulevard, and no one knows why that address is in there. And you can look it up, and it's actually a house that's still standing today. It's in a residential neighborhood, so I don't know, there's some speculation about, you know, what it was, and we don't really know, but we see a knife design change during that era when there's an address change as well. Not sure how that all correlates. We have no idea, but nonetheless, it's interesting as a collector because it's what keeps us up late at night trying to figure out, you know, what in the world was going on. And no one seems to remember or know. So
There's evidence of mail order problems.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Here's another example. These knives are very similar. This is a little bit larger knife. And you see this, they bring the scaler is still going on, and you'll see these knives that have the lignum vita handles, and they'll have some leather spacers in. You start bringing that in. This is a model 110 Skinner, so we've dropped the 111, 112, and 113, and now it's become a 110. And same kind of design. It's got the leather spacer and a different pommel on it. This is of the same era, but you can see the pommel change. You see it from there, and the construction of the knife is built different, but it goes from that to what we know more. This looks more like a standard buck knife. And yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. This is another fillet knife. This is one I found. I don't know if you remember the lucite one we saw earlier, but had this exaggerated kind of hump right here, and I believe that was for putting your thumb against when you're cleaning a fish. I found this knife, and I was pretty sure I was right. The person that was selling it said, well, there's something on the handle, and a lot of the wooden handled knives you'll see from the 1950s, they actually stamped it with their leather stamp, and it had their address. If you see one of the old sheaths, it'll say 1272 Moreno Boulevard, San Diego, California. Well, they would also take that leather stamp and put it on these handles and would hammer it in at times. And I have a couple of examples to see, but as soon as I read there's something written on the handle, I was pretty sure of what it was. And you can see it right here. It's hard to see, it's real faded, but it'll say, you know, Buck Knives, has the address in the middle, and then San Diego, California, right there in the handles.
Was there any other kind of wood used on those handles other than the Lakeland Bicon?
I don't know, see, because I don't know what kind of wood this is. I'm not sure. I never knew what kind of wood this was. There is another wood that's used, and I don't know what it was. Joe may know, but it's a yellow wood, and it has this same stamp in the handle. I'm not for sure, but in the 1950s, the only wood that I know that they used in mass production anyway would have been lignum vitae. I'm sure there were some one-offs here and there that they used other types of wood, but later on they go to an ebony wood, which we'll see, but that's not until you get into the 1960s. So.
That looks like maple. Looks like bird's eye maple.
Yeah, I have no idea what type of wood it was, but I know, I'm pretty sure it's not lignum vitae wood. Here's a set of steak knives that recently sold. It's a really neat set of knives, and for some reason during this time, Al took a lot of them, and it's just him playing with the knives and having a different look, but he notched the knives all the way around, and there's several examples of that through the years, and I guess it's just kind of a aesthetics thing, you know. He just kind of wanted to add a different look to it, but you'll see these types of things going through. Golly, I don't know what's happening. Okay, let's back up. There you go. Okay, and here's a picture of 102 in lucite during this time frame. This is what I wanted to show you. So I took one apart one day, and this one was not pinned, and probably the reason why it was not pinned is because he took and put paper in the back to keep it tight. Have you seen that before, Joe, where they do it? But that was able to solve the problem and stop the pommel in the right position as he was configuring it. But you can see the bolt that comes through, so that's a bolt that's actually welded onto that file that has become a knife now. It's another Skinner. Group 8 knives, they seem to be the rarest. Gosh, I wish I could say that I'd seen a bunch of them. The only one I saw was the one that Joe sent me a picture of. I've never seen these knives. What's neat about them is, you know, they had handles of lignum vitae, and they had lucite trim, and I wish there was more examples. But, you know, I'd never seen one until recent, and I've owned a lot of these knives, and I've looked for a lot. And so this was a magazine ad that actually had that description in it. So it was something they clearly made. But this is the closest example that I know of, and Joe sent me the picture. But it's an elk handle, and they used lucite spacers in it. And so we have to assume that that's what the magazine ad was talking about. And this is of a little bit later period, but just have to assume that that's what they were talking about. There's a close-up picture. You can kind of see the lucite spacers a little better.
Are the other ones hard fiber or leather?
In that picture, I'm sure they're leather. I would think that they're leather spacers, yeah. If they were hard fiber, I would say this knife had been reworked at some point, and that the lucite spacers may or may not be original to the knife. But I believe that they're leather. Did you see this knife in person, Joe?
Yeah, I don't remember that particular one. I have a picture of another one that I'll give you a copy of.
Okay.
That I did see in person, and it has the lucite in the middle, and I believe the handle was wood.
Okay. Which would have been a little more accurate to the description of the magazine ad, I guess, because I think they talk about it having wooden handle with lucite trim. So, Group 9 is stamped buck on the left or signed on the right. At one point, they started taking an electric pencil and signing the knives buck instead of stamping them. I don't know if they thought maybe it would speed up the process, or if they were having a problem with blades cracking, or I'm really not sure what the thought process was. But anyway, you'll start to see some of them that are actually signed. This is a 104 Fighter with the lignum vita handle on it, leather spacers, and one of the things that Al would do sometimes is he would use a brass guard and maybe a brass spacer in the back, and he would mix brass and aluminum, so you will see knives with a mixture of metals in them. This is a knife I got real confused about when I first purchased it. It's a 104 Fighter. It's the same knife as this, but one of the problems with lignum vita handles, and one of the reasons why Buck went away from it, is they would crack on you over time, and they would be sent in to be reworked. And so this knife right here got sent in sometime, once again in the 1960s. It's got hard fiber spacers, but it still had the original brass guard and alternating aluminum. So all they did was they changed out the handle to a phenolic handle in the 1960s. They kept the brass and aluminum guard and just tightened it down to the size spacers that they had. So this is a rework, something like that might come in today if it had a broken handle and you wanted to save the knife. So that is kind of helps decode the knife a little bit. I wasn't sure what I had when I first bought it, and talking with Joe and Larry, they kind of helped me go through it through the years and figure out, what exactly it is. And it's a reworked knife, so you will run across those along the way. There's another one during that time frame. Not sure why, but you still kind of carrying on the exaggerated finger grooves with the kind of weird pommel on it. And then this is the same knife. I mean, but it looks a little bit different. Not sure why the difference of, yeah. Not sure why this one has more of a chamfer. That other one's a little thinner. Not sure what's going on, and you can notice that it has an extra spacer in the back. Sometimes, that was something they had to do to make everything fit together. And then here yet is another one, and it's from the same era, but it's stamped on the opposite side. I don't know if that was a mistake when they grabbed the stamp, or if it even mattered to them really at the time. I'm not sure, but you can see kind of a correlation between the deep finger grooves, Joe, between like that one and this earlier version. Is kind of an in-between, But so many different variations, even in the same, time frames. I'm not sure why. This is a 119 with lignum vita handle. It's got an extra spacer in the back. Kind of a rare knife when you find them with the extra spacers. They don't all typically have that, so kind of neat. This is like a little paring knife. And I put it in here just to kind of show you an example. If you look at the back, there's a small leather spacer in the back. This is an identical knife, no leather spacer in the back. So just kind of shows you the use of them as they needed them for a shim. You know, it kind of different. But here's a 102, and it's following all the guidelines. It's stamped buck on the left, but it's got a lucite handle, and buck had gone away from a lucite handle during this time frame. So just kind of shows you that the rules don't always apply, and you could kind of get, I guess, whatever you wanted. You know, you don't see too many of them that are lucite this late in the game, you know, but there's one right there. Group 10, they're stamped buck on the left, and the handles are made of ebony and elk. They start going away from the lignum vitae, and they go to the ebony handles and elk handles. And I think the main reason why is that the handles were cracking, correct, Joe? And so they were seeking out a different handle material. Here's an example. It's a real dark wood. Almost looks like phenolic in a way. It's blackish brown. There's one there. This is kind of a neat knife. It's a 105, I guess, is what you'd call it, but you can see how long it is. It's almost a foot long. And, you know, a 105, I believe, is 9 1/4. And the rest of the measurements pretty much match up, but it was a Gaboon ebony handle. And during the time, if you look and research the old catalogs, you could get any knife you wanted, and you could get them longer if you wanted, and it was like $2 extra. It said right in the catalog, hey, for $2 you can get it any length you want. So anyway, somebody wanted a really long 105 apparently. So
It wasn't $2 per inch.
you know, it might have been. I really don't know. Joe, was it $2 an inch?
Yeah, it was something per inch. I can't remember if it was $1 or $2.
Yeah. So yeah, you get pretty much anything you wanted, but really neat knife. You don't see it very often, especially ones that are a little bit longer. 119 with an elk handle. Really neat knives. I really love this era. The elk handle stuff is something I really like. This is a right-handed stamp and a left-handed stamp, 119. Don't know why, but you see it once again where the rules have been changed. Then we go back to the left, but this one is an all brass 119, and did the same thing, mixed in some of the aluminum and brass together. But you see kind of a wide variety in some of the guards and pommels during this time as far as the handle materials. They mixed a lot of aluminum and brass. Here's another example. It's a 110 Skinner. It's got a brass, the top guard is brass, and then the under trim is aluminum. Here's a picture of Al. Bowie knives seem to fascinate people for some reason. I mean, many of you guys own 124s, and even though you don't use the knives, you buy them because you love them. It's a giant knife, and there's always a lot of fascination around Bowie knives, especially with buck. And I think, and Joe, you have to probably help me out on this, but a lot of the attention is centered around Frank, Chuck's brother, with building Bowie knives. We don't know specifically who built which Bowie knife, but Frank was known to build large Bowie knives, and I'll show you some examples of those throughout here. But this is a picture of Al I found, and you can see it's stamped buck horizontal right here, so you know it doesn't really follow any of the rules that we know. It's stamped more like an early 110 or a 121, a 1964 121, where it's stamped horizontal. Here's a picture of Frank, and he's actually building a Bowie knife in this picture. So there's a lot of thought around Frank building a lot of the Bowie knives during the time. This knife is one of them. I don't know who built it, but it's got the brass guard, brass pommel, aluminum trim in between, and that's about the size of a 124. I know my dad bought this knife, and when he bought it, I thought it was a 119, and we were talking on the phone, and I said, so that 119 coming, he said, well, it's not a 119. I said, what do you mean? He said, oh, no, it's way bigger, and it is. It's about the size of a 124, so I didn't realize it at the time.
Question.
Fairly large knife.
Stepping back to the Bowie knife for a minute, Was the knife blade material still filed on the, at that time?
You know, I would almost say no. I don't think it would be a file big. I don't know if they were using plate steel or if some of them were out of leaf spring material. I'm not really sure what they made them out of.
And then when you get into this style, boy, you know the material that the blade's made out of?
I really have no idea. I don't know. It's a fantastic question. I'd never really thought about where they were getting, because all the knives we've seen up until now, something I guess I left out, were actual files, worn out files, and it was Chuck's job to take and grind those file marks off of the file, and that way then they could be ground into knife blades and tempered and turned into what you see here. And there's times, and there's knives I own, I'm sure Chuck's owned some, Joe's owned some, that the file marks were actually left on the knife. And Chuck would go, yeah, that was my bad, He said, I didn't get them all off, but they're, yeah.
I know that usually it's on the older kitchen knives, they use power hacksaw blades, and you can find stray letters and symbols from the original maker of that blade sometimes on those.
That's a good point, and I've found some of that on some of the big ones that I've owned. Same thing. But we do, if I've got some of those kitchen knives in, we can kind of answer some of those questions, because a lot of guys that made their own knives weren't in factory settings. My grandfather made a few, and he would make them out of saw blades because it was the best steel you could find. And so they would do similar things. They would make large kitchen knives out of, saw blades and things like that. So. Here's another one. It's got the exaggerated knuckle duster on it. I'm not sure if that was an aftermarket thing after it left Buck or not, but you can see tiny Buck stamp here. Bernard Levine sold this knife. He had it for a while and sold it on his consignment, but it's a really large Bowie knife. As you can see the tape below. Here's another one, another example. It's a large knife. This one was in California. Anybody that travels the California knife shows might have seen this for sale a few years back. Has this exaggerated chamfer up here, brass guard, aluminum pommel. Kind of a neat knife. Here's another one. This one's I think there's a letter from Buck on this one that says they believe Frank made it. But you can see it's just a much different knife. It's got bone hard fiber spacers, so it was definitely made sometime in the 1960s. That's a set that I own. It's the only set that I know that exists. It's a axe knife combo set with elk, and it's a pretty neat set. You don't see these sets too often. And yep, it sure is. It's the only one I've ever seen like this, but it has a pouch here, original stone in it. I've not seen another one like it that had that stone in there. Sign knives. A lot of these they're from similar eras. But I kind of grouped them together so you could see all the different varieties. But they would use, I spoke earlier about an electric pencil being used. And you'll start to see it right here. This one's kind of kind of gets you both ways. I was talking about that yellowish wood earlier that was used. I don't know what type of wood it is, but it's almost bright yellow. And it's got the leather stamp in the handle. And it's signed Buck horizontally down through there. And there's the grooves again that were cut into the handles. Not sure why I did it, but you see it a lot. This is a micarta paring knife. It's signed Buck right here. It's kind of hard to see. One of the things I love about the knives is the stories they tell. If you notice, there's like 4 notches up on the top, and I just wonder, was that a deer that they killed and notched? I just wonder what record they were keeping with that knife, and that's one of the. Yeah, it's one of the neat things. Could be a friction thing, but it was only on one side, so I'm not sure. But it something that's kind of cool. And you can see it a little bit better where it was signed Buck. This is one of the kitchen knives. In the 125 master carving set, there was it's a set of 3, and I think the ad said it was designed to keep the housewife happy or something, you know, the little lady happy. Yeah. So I don't know how PC that is, but that's what the ad said. And right here, they were signed Buck, right up in the middle. This was the smaller. I never owned the middle knife, but this was the smaller of the 3, and the same thing. It's signed right in the middle. There you go. That's a little better picture. Here's one, and this is like Joe and I talked about, mid-50s with the exaggerated finger grooves. It was actually signed Buck as opposed to the Buck or just the Buck. So you see that for a period of time. And here's a knife that would have been made out of probably a big saw blade. This is a very large butcher knife. It's probably about that big, so it's a very large knife. And it's lignum vita handle. He's got the notches carved in the top, and it's signed Buck. On this side, really small, and then on the other side, it's probably 2 or 3 inches large. So for some reason, he changed the size of how he signed it. Right there is that. And then on the, I didn't have a picture of the other side. It might not have shown up. But on the other side, it was Buck, really large, in the same spot, but just much larger.
Question?
So,
On the signatures, has it been like authenticated that who signed it as per the signature, say Al or?
we would assume that it would be Al because of
Have they ever found a signature on a piece of paper that matches that? I was just wondering if.
I don't know. I don't know that there's ever been a forensic.
Never gone through that exercise. That's I mean, it'd be easy to do. I've got a signature.
Yeah, and so, yeah, but no, the knives, they started doing it in the 1950s. Yeah. The only one that I've ever seen that varied is a butcher knife that was made in a barrel nut configuration with a phenolic handle. It was not actually signed. It was just B-U-C-K, you know, it wasn't in cursive or anything, so I don't really know who put that on there, but that, I mean, I would assume it would have been, you know, Al or somebody in the shop. But here's just a picture of another one. Some of the pictures aren't very good, but it's another signed butcher knife. Most of the kitchen knives I see are signed, and like I said, I don't know if they didn't stamp them because they were afraid of fracturing the blades like the early 121s they got away from, stamping them up horizontally because the blades would crack. So I'm not for sure when they went to the power saw blades to make these kitchen knives if they couldn't handle a stamp, but most of them are signed. So just kind of a... Yeah, it's fuzzy. I'm not sure, but there's an example of it right there. Here's another fillet knife type style. Once again, he's got the ridges on the knife, and it's a little bit different than some of the ones you see, but it is signed Buck, right in the tang area. There you go. Barbecue sets. This is always of interest to people. I wrote an article a few years back in one of the newsletters, and you can revisit that and see, but these sets were extremely expensive back then, and I think they were about $30 back in the 40s and 50s, and that was a lot of money. And so I think that's the reason you don't see very many of them. I'll show you the pictures of the ones that I know exist. There's not very many. This is a set that I used to own, and had a large carving knife, and then the smaller knives that went with it in a little presentation wooden box. Real nice set. There they are laid out, and you can typically date all these the same way, the Buck dot. But really nice knives. Oh gosh, I don't know what keeps happening there, but so that's a set, and I believe is that lignum vita, Joe?
You know, I sent you, I think, pictures of one that was made when they replaced the floorboards on a destroyer or a carrier
Okay, that may be it.
in San Diego. I don't remember for sure the name of the ship.
Yeah. So there's another set. Here's a set, and I think that's a black set with a white stripe. Black set with a white stripe. That is kind of a bluish see-through with black and white. Some of these pictures are fuzzy. Not all these knives are mine, and you take what pictures you can get when you can get them. And so that is an aqua color set, really nice. 117s. This is of interest to a lot of people, and these are the knives where they where the blades would just be replaced, and you know the handles were not manufactured or the knives from buck. But some of the different ones that are out there, you can see they went throughout the years. The blade stamps will change on some of these. Model numbers will be on some and not on others. Kind of follows that same path of the rest of the knives.
Is there a name for those?
117. What was the name he attached to that?
Expensive.
Yeah, I can't remember, but it just 117 was the model number associated with it. This one has a model number on the back, 117. There you go, a little bit closer.
Lifeboat knife, that's all I've ever called it.
Yeah.
There you go, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, it's a lifeboat
Yeah.
knife.
Just a couple of different ones through the years that I've either owned or had pictures of. I guess one of the favorite things to me and what I mainly focus on collecting at this point is axes and the knives. Those seem to be one of the hardest to find, and I really do like them a lot. This is an ad, we believe, from 1949. Somebody wrote on it, but and this is where I got it from earlier. Responding to many requests from enthusiast users of buck knives, is now manufacturing a light belt axe made to meet the high standards of their famous knives. They're really neat. You don't see too many of them. Joe's got an example, I believe, out here in black lucite of one that you can take a look at. But they're really neat. This is my collection of the early axes. They're hard to find, but the one that Joe said I could take home was the black lucite because I don't have it, and that would complete my collection. So I did appreciate that from Joe. But yes, the actual, just look at the axe. The knife is an addition that I put in there. But yes, it is aluminum, and Buck did make it. There's, I don't know, what about 3 known, 3 or 4? Oh, you've seen much more than I have then. So it's yeah, you know what's funny is some of these, that I believe the aluminum ones are all one piece. Is that right, Joe? The heads aren't brazed on. I don't believe that they're brazed on.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
I think that the aluminum one is a solid piece, and the rest of them are brazed on, and you can see a difference even in that. So this one, the head is made separate and welded on, welded on, welded on. And then in these two, this is the same thing with this one, but in these two, he adds an extra piece of metal after welding it, and then welds an extra piece of metal, I guess, to reinforce them. But you see that on a couple. This is a desert ironwood and elk. This is lignum vita, and then your 3 lucites. They made the lucite in 4 colors. I've never seen it in any other color. And like I said, I'm missing the black set, and that's all that I'm missing from that set. But that's the end of the show. You know. There's so much this hard to know about this stuff. I mean, we rack our brains and have worked on stuff for years trying to figure it out. And if you have questions about it, I'd love to help you. I know Joe can. If you ever want copies, I can always send you picture files and copies. If you want a copy of the presentation, I can always email it to you or send you a disc or whatever, but if you're that interested in it. But if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Not a question, but an announcement. When we came in here, Tanner Cook, Chuck's secretary, said that Chuck's office is open, and feel free to get down there and look around.
Okay.
Straight across and down on the right-hand side.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Are they still that church where the original buck knives were made?
You know, my understanding, and I recently got in contact with the pastor of that church. It has a new name, and I believe, I don't know, I'm not real sure because I haven't shown up to see it in person, but my understanding was the original church had been torn down and the basement filled in with the remnants of the church, because there's no longer a basement on the property. And that's what I understand for the current pastor. He contacted me and had me build replica knives of what Hoyt made in that church so they could display them in the church. And so I've actually built some knives to recreate what Hoyt did to hang in that church. And I'd really like to go and view it for myself. And if there's any way I can get in that basement and get some of that wood, I'd love to. So, but, yeah. So that's the story that I've been told by the current pastor, which his name's Pastor Andrew, and he's in Post Falls, Idaho. The church is called The Rock now. It's been renamed, and you can look it up online.
Mountain Home, right?
Mountain Home. Sorry, Mountain Home, Idaho. I don't know what I said, but Mountain Home, Idaho. Yep. But it's still a church there, and I've asked him all types of questions, and he said that there is records of Hoyt, pastoring that church there. And he had some other information. He said some of the elderly members are still alive that knew Hoyt when they were young, and that some of them even have knives he made for them while he was a pastor at that church. Yeah, and so that's really neat. I'd love to get out there and try to pull some of that together, because that's neat. But yes, sir.
Heath, I think if you could pull that off, maybe a collection of those knives would serve as trade bait for the black set that Joe has.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, I guess we're adjourned here.